Hey everybody, St. Paul Peterson here, and welcome to episode 7, yes, 7 of Music on the Run. This week's guests are Ben and Leo Sidran, father-son team. Now, the Peterson family has known these two for, I would say, over 35 years. Ben is responsible for so much of the good things that has happened to the Peterson family. He has created so many opportunities for us with the Steve Miller Band and David Sanborn, to name a couple of things. And of course, touring with him as an artist all over the world. Ben is an author. He is a television personality. And of course, a recording artist and a producer and a doctor. Yes, he is. The doctor is in. And of course, his kid. We've called him Kid Leo forever. But Leo is an incredibly talented producer, artist, multi-instrumentalist, and even has an Academy Award nomination. And those two are next on Music on the Run. Hey everybody, St. Paul Peterson here, and welcome to another edition of Music on the Run. And today's podcast, I have the pleasure of interviewing two of my favorite people, and they happen to be father and son. Ben is a Grammy-nominated artist with 30-plus solo albums to his credit. He's also an accomplished producer, author, and journalist, and constantly tours all over the world. Leo's an Academy Award and Grammy-winning producer, a multi-instrumentalist and recording artist who also composes for film and commercials. He also happens to host a really rad podcast called The Third Story. Welcome, please, Ben and Leo Sidran.
Hey, thank you, Paul.
Thank
you,
Paul.
How many lies did I just tell there?
A couple, three.
I got it pretty good, right?
Yeah, no,
I
good.
think you all. I like the lies that
Do
you
you?
told. They
I
made us
prefer the
sound
lies.
Try to
good,
enhance the truth.
Yes.
That's okay.
I
That's what
prefer
we
the
do
lies.
these days.
Yeah.
We enhance the truth.
Yeah.
But for the good.
For the good of everyone.
Yeah.
So we just walked down the hallway. We were up doing a session for you.
Yes. Well, actually, my producer over here arranged this session. Now that I'm a senior,
Emeritus.
Are you a senior
emeritus,
now?
I'm a senior guy. Yeah, I
Okay.
got bus passes and everything.
Cheap movie tickets.
Whatever you.
Hey, look, I would totally go there.
Oh yeah.
It's a
Get
good
the
thing.
discount.
It's a good thing. So
the discount.
He's now telling me what to do and when to do it. It's very nice.
Do you listen?
Yeah, because I got no ideas myself. I don't have a better idea. It's perfect.
Truth.
It's
I don't believe that.
Not true.
Does he listen? He does
He does listen.
Let me answer
Yeah.
that for you. I watched it, the whole
Yeah.
camaraderie
What did
thing
you
happen
think?
today.
Not to turn it on you this quickly in the event here, but what did you think? Because we don't know what it's like to watch us do what
because
we do.
we have a similar
Yes.
thing with the musical family.
Yes.
You're working with your father, me working with my mom and my
Yes.
siblings. Just to sit and watch how that came together and how you guys interacted was so, first of all, natural, organic, but respectful, because you don't want to step on his toes and you don't want to step on his toes. But there was an agreement,
Yeah.
and it didn't take any time. I was like, oh, cool. It was fascinating to watch that.
Well, it is. What we did today is pretty typical. We came in with a half a song, and
Somewhat of an arrangement.
Yeah.
kind of idea. You
Right.
walked in, you played guitar on it, and so you were there as it sort of came together. And
Yeah, and I was just telling we were speaking of Mike, and where I was saying, you didn't. No one even had to tell me what to do. I got a little scared.
Yeah.
No, don't play that. No, you never said that.
But isn't that, in your experience, so typical that if people have to tell you too much, then one of you is, if somebody's telling you a lot, then one of you is the wrong person in the room.
Well, true.
You know what I mean?
Unless they're your brother.
Yes.
My brother won't
Yes.
have the.
Sure.
You know what though, and I appreciate it when he does. He's like, I'll go through a first song and I'll play too much, and he'll be like, "I'm glad you got that out of your system." So I hear his voice in my head. I'm like, okay.
Now I know what I'm going to play.
See, but I think what's going on here is that families that work together know how to talk to each other, and it's not always simple and direct. It's a lot of times it's a roundabout, but it's a way of being mutual, a camaraderie, a feeling that you generate that gets you all where you need to go. It's not necessarily specific. You play this, you play that,
Right.
but like. Well, in your family, I mean, your big brother, Bill, the best advice he ever gave me, and I'm sure he gave you the same advice, was play the stuff that got you thrown out of school. I thought that was...
Get out of your own way.
Yeah, I always thought...
That's a challenge. The first thing you have to do is get yourself thrown out of school.
Well, you have to go back to that. You have to go back to that,
Some of us didn't get that far.
Don't worry about wrong and right.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
True.
Yeah.
You guys are also in town doing a couple of gigs.
Yeah.
True.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We're playing at Crooners this year. We've been coming every summer.
Yep.
And playing in Minneapolis. The last couple of years we've been playing at Crooners. The venue changes, but I think one thing that is pretty typical of what we do is we start to get into these little routines. You talk about Ben is touring constantly, but he's also a little bit of a creature of habit, and we have set up these kind of traditions in our musical life.
Right.
We go to Europe every November.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I'm doing my very best to emulate that. I'm
Yes, you want to go
he's
there.
got it figured out.
Yes.
He's got it figured out. And you keep going back, and they love you more, and you stay longer, and you bring your loved ones with you. And the hang continues over there.
It was intentional. This was like 25 years ago. I realized
Yeah.
that if you're going to do it over there, you have to go back 5-6 times minimum just to establish. So I started doing it. I was going, and then after a while, they said, "Oh, it's November. Ben's coming back."
Right.
So I became part of the
It's Ben
calendar.
time.
It's Ben time.
No, it really is. I mean, almost to the extent that people say sometimes, we expect you in November. We've thought maybe
Sure.
May would be good because
Yeah.
the weather's a little better
Yeah.
in May, and people say, well, no, the clubs where we play in Spain and in France, they kind of expect us and they block out the time for us in November. And so May, we might not be able to fit in our, usual month-long tour if we tried to go in May. They kind of
Right.
wait for us.
Yeah,
now.
they expect that in
Yeah.
the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll get into this as
Yeah.
the podcast goes,
Yeah.
but you two have been gigging for how long with each other?
Well, it's hard to put a proper start date on it. But, I mean, when I finished college, I'm 42 now, so 20 years ago when I finished college,
Right.
I did my first real tour with Ben. We did like a month or something. So I always think that's kind of when we really started
So that's
doing
the
it.
marker, you getting out of college.
But even before that, we were doing a lot of gigs together in Madison where Ben lives still and where I grew
Right.
up and went to college. So we started playing, though, jamming, we would call it. Get together and jam when I was, 10 or something.
Well, that takes me to this. We've known each other a very long time. I don't think the listeners necessarily know that.
How
but,
could they know that?
Oh, man.
Right.
I've known
We've
you,
known
Ben.
each other. I've known you for 40 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ever since, now, you
78.
Did Billy find you or did you find Billy? Billy is my brother, everybody, in case you don't know that.
I met your big brother Billy in 1978, and David Rivkin
Yes.
brought us together, and with Natural Life, he brought me together with Natural Life, which was Billy's band, so that I could
Right.
meet these cats. And
they were just burning back.
oh,
then,
it
too.
was just
Oh.
unbelievable. And so we started working, but it was really in 85. I met you in 85. You may not remember this, but there was a scene over at Billy's house
Okay.
where you were doing some drum programming
Oh,
for
boy.
me in
That's
85.
what I did back in those days.
Yep, you did.
Yeah.
And we used it on the record. It was fantastic.
For-
you were
for
a
your
kid.
record?
For my record. You were a kid, and we used your drum programming on the record.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
The kid, I've known you. I call you kid. That's not his name. His
Yeah.
name is Leo, and they sound exactly alike, by the way.
You'll
When I was
never know which
listening-
one is talking.
Yes.
When I was listening to your podcast
Yes.
that you have on a
It's
third
hard.
story, I'm like, I've known these guys their entire life. Well, your
Yes.
entire life. I can't pick you apart, except for the storytelling.
Yeah.
That's where it comes into play.
But the voice, it is hard to. I often threaten Ben that I'm going to call the bank and say, "It's Ben Sidran. I'd like to make a withdrawal."
Yeah.
See if they question me. Yeah, I mean, Paul. Again, as you know, I've interviewed you, and my early memory of you is your first solo record, which I just went to school so deep on. And that's why at 42, I can finally say we did a session today. And
we did.
And
you're saying it's the first time we've done that.
Well, we've worked together on things, overdubbed and stuff, but I don't think we ever did just sit in a room and play. And what's great is it felt so natural. I mean, I had to almost go back and just tell my 16-year-old self, one day you're going to do a session with Paul and it's not even going to feel like anything. It's just going to feel like the most natural thing in the world. Because, I was such a fan of yours.
That's so funny. And I sure remember hanging out with you back in those days. We cut that first record right here at Gration Audio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steve Weiss and my brother Ricky and so many other people. It's just crazy.
I made a lot of great records here. Some of my favorite records that I made were made in this room, and the room in the front.
Yeah, I mean, this space has so much history. I mean, my mom and dad recording here, Bruce Swedeen.
Yes.
But I have a feeling right now in this particular building, and I have a feeling this is what it felt like when you first started working here in the 80s when Steve Weiss was just getting his room set up here, and that there's energy and there's momentum and there's like a creative work that kind of starts to snowball. People want to be in the building. Something's going on in one room and in another room, and and I feel that in here now. And it's like when you come into a space like that from the outside, it's palpable. Something's going on.
Well, it's kind of fun. It's not a competition, but it's a. Yeah. What are you doing? What time did you get in today?
Yeah.
John's like, you're in early today. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is kind of
definitely pushes the buttons. You know?
That's healthy competition. That is
totally
competition. That's the way it's supposed to be, man.
In a sense, that is the difference between the father-son dynamic and the brother dynamic. Like, I always thought when you look at these musical families where you've got siblings, there's a more natural competition. When it's with parents, it's not a parent and a child like Ben and I have. It's not competitive. Now, I do think we've worked together so long that we have started to influence one another. I mean, most of my life, I would say I was just heavily influenced by Ben. You talk about hearing your brother's voice in your ear. I had Ben's voice in my ear all the time. And
I love that, though.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
That's so about the hang, as we say.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. It is about that. And the ability to play with your family is really a special thing. I mean, it's never what it appears to be. It's always, in the spaces. It's in the relationship. It's in the thing between people. It's not what's said so often as what doesn't have to be said, what goes unsaid, and the feeling of being in a room with people. So we refer to that as the hang, where the hang is everything. But it really is. Yeah. It totally colors everything that happens musically. That if you want to be there with somebody, and if you're willing to be in that room with somebody and surrender your role, okay, I'm not the parent anymore, okay, I'm not the big brother anymore, we're just the two of us together, a lot of magic can happen. You have to be willing to get in that space and just, go for it.
I think what you said, Leo, is really true. The difference in the relationship between parent and child, other than brother and brother, or brother and sister.
Exactly.
It's kind of a nurturing and a mutual respect, which I saw today. I mean, look, I did thousands of gigs with my mom.
Yes.
She just threw me to the wolves.
Yes.
Ben, you threw him to the wolves from the very, very beginning.
Absolutely. When he was 14, I think, there's this great bebop saxophone player named Frank Morgan, who was, at the time, he had just gotten out of prison. He was living in Milwaukee. This is a guy who was like really right out of Charlie Parker, man. And he came and he was hanging out in Madison, and we played a gig together. And the bass player was this guy, Richard Davis, who's super historic bass player, and me, and Frank Morgan, who was like a hero to beboppers, and the kid on drums.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful because it was totally throwing a 14-year-old kid to the wolves.
See, again, I like the way, I'm not going to dispute the story.
What's that?
I will say 14 may not be the exact age, but
15?
it was young.
It sounds good.
I think it was probably 16.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think 14 is a little...
sounds better. Let's go with
7 years old, I was doing a gig with
6
Frank
years
Morgan.
old, he was playing.
Enhance the truth.
I was playing long solos, I remember. I was 7.5 years old. No, I mean, I was young. The truth was I was thrown to the wolves, and everybody accepted it. I mean, maybe you felt this way too, but I had to get out of my own head, and I don't know if you felt this way. It took me a long time to get out of my own head because I thought I was thrown in there before I was ready. I mean, I wasn't ready, but I was given a chance to perform and play and hang with people because I came through the door with you. But the truth is that I didn't get any vibe from anybody almost ever that I can remember because I was young or the kid.
Well, that's because of I'm going to interrupt you because here's why I think.
Yeah.
Because of your natural God-given talent and the respect for your father. That's a trickle down. If Ben says he's cool, and give the kid a shot.
And I'll tell you something else. I think, because I recognize this now also, that we see when somebody's got, they called it the curse, right? When you see a kid who's got the curse, maybe there's talent. I don't know what to make of talent sometimes. What I do know about is passion or like love, desire,
Right.
Because I think I had desire. I know I had desire. I didn't.
Boy, did you ever. And you still do.
So that's the thing that I think people would see.
Yeah.
You see a young kid with the desire.
Right.
Of course you're going to open the door for that kid and try to nurture that thing.
Yeah, because you wanted it so bad. Man, I remember that clear as a bell.
Yeah.
It's like, this is Leo, this is my son.
Yeah.
You were like asking me a million questions,
exactly.
and he's got it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, and you would never throw somebody to the wolves if they weren't ready for it. It could do
You
damage.
knew. You must have known.
Yeah,
Did you?
no, I knew he could do it, and the reason I knew it was because when he played, it felt good. It's not that he had all these chops; he never had all these chops. It just felt good, and in the end, that's all you really need. You need to feel good up there, and if you feel good, magic can happen. Nobody goes away from a gig going, "Well, did you hear that guy's triplets?" Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
They don't. They
Right.
don't. And so I felt good playing with him. I knew other people felt good playing. So that's it. That's the whole thing. And there's no age limit on that, And you can get guys who've been practicing and they're 50 years old. They might not feel good,
Right.
So
they might have the best chops in the
Best
world.
chops
Be
in
like,
the world.
no.
no. So, throwing them to the wolves is just sort of... It's sort of like what primitive tribes used to do with young men at an early age, right?
True.
They'd literally put them in a situation where they had to go out, survive somewhere to come back, and then they knew they could do it.
But the other thing is, and the reference to tribes, I think makes sense and is connected to this, is that it's because you're nurturing another generation for the community, to keep the music going, to keep this tradition
Isn't that the truth?
going.
Because you believe in it and it's important.
And we need more. We're going to need more. It's like
man.
you're replacing yourself. You're grooming the next group.
So you're at home. You're in Madison. What is you have a drum set downstairs? You just start playing with him, or how did that all?
It was
how
in
does
the
that
attic.
transpire?
It was in the attic. When he was 13, well, he had been hanging out with you and the people here at Gration
Right.
Audio and everybody, Paisley Park. And so he wanted to have gear at home. So the first thing he did is he got a DX7 and then he got a multi-track cassette player and he started building a little studio. And then I had a little XB2 organ synthesizer kind of a deal. And he had a drum kit up there. And so at some point, we just started playing together, organ and drums, which is natural,
Oh,
right?
cool.
I was playing bass.
So you're
and
playing
stuff.
left hand?
I'm
Yeah.
playing left-hand bass, playing organ, playing drums, and we got a pocket going,
That's
man.
what we were doing, yeah.
How great is that?
And we would just go up there, and it would feel so good. And we would play stuff that we literally didn't know. We just go up there and start playing. Where playing is just like from the nub. You don't even talk about the change.
And what's
or anything.
Judy saying at this point in time?
She's happy that we're up there.
Yeah.
She's
like,
she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't care.
Right.
Yeah, they're up there.
Yeah, right.
And the other thing is that Leo loved building out his recording studio. So he did this year by year by year. And we talk about this, how it's such a blessing for a young person to fall in love with something, to have something that they want and they love and they care about.
But how cool that it happened to be the same thing that you were passionate about. It could have been trains.
Sure,
it could have been
Could have been anything.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool.
But to be able to share that as father and son is unbelievable. It really is.
So there's one more thing that I have to relate to you in terms of our relationship, and that is when Leo was 15 or 16, let's say, when we did that Frank Morgan gig around that same period. This was in the 90s, I guess it would have been. And I
Early
was
90s.
doing all that record production, right? And I was
Yeah.
spending all the time in the studio, and it was a struggle to go out and play gigs because, to play a gig, you got to book it, you got to get the band together. If you're producing, it's hard. So I was starting to think maybe I would stop playing gigs because I was spending all my time in the studio, and I was digging it. And I'd
Yeah.
played gigs for 40 years by then, man. I mean,
Right.
I played every venue I needed to play. And I was honestly thinking about, maybe because the Cats, I had Billy and Gordy all tucked in with Miller, right? They had
yeah.
that gig. I didn't have to worry about them anymore. I thought maybe. And just then, Leo started saying, man, let's go out and play gigs. And because Leo wanted to go out and play gigs, I said, okay, let's go play gigs. And to this day, I'm grateful. I'm out here, 25 years later, playing gigs because of Leo.
Because he said, Dad, come on.
Let's go play. Yeah.
Fascinating, man.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Well, let's go back a little bit.
Yes.
You still live in Madison.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You could have moved anywhere.
Right.
Why'd you stay in Madison?
Family reasons.
See?
Yeah. Family reasons. It was a decision. It was clearly a decision. We lived in L.A. before we lived in Madison. Judy and I lived there. We lived in North Hollywood.
Right.
I was playing sessions with rock and rollers,
Yeah.
rock and roll guys. I had just produced a record for Capitol Records, and they were offering me a staff producer's job. Back then, they had staff producers.
Sure.
And I thought, well, this would be really cool. And I came home and told Judy the exciting news, and she said, I don't like it here. I hate it. I don't like.
Oh,
And-
can you imagine?
Yeah.
What was going through your head? You must be going, wait a minute, this is the greatest opportunity of my life.
But what actually was going through my head, and it's to this day, it was without thought. What was going through my head is, well, what do you want to do? I'd be more than happy to do whatever you want. I was so into the relationship with my wife that's what really was making me happy. So when she said she didn't like Los Angeles and she wanted to go back to Madison where we met, I just went. And when I got back to Madison, I just invented the life I needed to have in order to keep playing music and to have a family.
And I love what you just said because that's one of my next questions. How many plates can Ben Sidran keep spinning at the same time? But here's the thing, and do it immaculately, incredibly, and 150% with accuracy and heart. And so, I mean, you've been a curator of talent. You have done radio, television. You've changed people's lives by hooking them up with different gigs, me being one of them. But this, I mean, that must make you feel incredibly, I don't know what the word would be, but happy maybe is the word, because you see your friends and you place them in these different situations and you just sit back and watch. I mean, look at Ricky.
Yeah.
What you've done for Ricky, what you've done for Billy, what you've done for me, and hundreds of people, I'm sure, that I don't know. How does that make you feel?
And not only in music, there's people in media, for example. There are
Right.
people who work in public radio who say, your dad hooked me up with this job in D.C., and now I'm the program director of XYZ. It's all over the place.
He's a PhD, but I call him Dr. Hookup for that reason. But you are, and you didn't have to do that for anybody.
Well, Leo and I were talking recently about the fact that it actually does make you feel better to give than to receive. It's just a fact of life. You feel better when you give something than when you take something. And I've never been threatened by anybody else's success. I enjoy being in a room with people who are having fun. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what I love. I love the hang. The reason we
Right.
spend time together and
Yeah.
all these things is because it feels good. I like, I've had people pass this on to me where you don't open a door in return for a door that's going to be open for you. You open the door because
You owe me one.
yeah, it's because the air comes in and it's healthy for everybody,
right.
and you feel good.
And there's enough for everybody.
And that's a secret.
Yeah.
It's not a finite pie, and if you get yours, it doesn't mean I'm not going to get mine. The more, the merrier. The more good feeling that's out here, the more good feeling will be generated. And I've just been lucky because I've been interested in all these different things. I've been interested in media. I've been interested, but the bottom line is I'm interested in musicians. I love being with musicians. I always have, and was part of Leo's curse. He loves being around musical people. There's something about musical people that can be very medicinal. It can be very healing to be around musical people.
Well, that's what it's all about. Music is the healer. And by the way, the fact that you would hook different people up, I see it happening with them returning the favor and paying it forward. I do it because you set an example.
That's beautiful.
But that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to go, here, it's your turn, and it's my greatest honor to be able to do that for other folks.
Yeah.
It's so cool. So you have always done projects surrounded by music, whether it's radio, television, writing your books, different things like that. Is there a particular project that stands out for you as being your favorite?
Boy, well, I can tell you that all the various projects are in some ways just at the core the same. They're about the life. They're about the music life. And whether we're like we did today, we went in there and I had this kernel of an idea for a song based on, democracy really is what that song was about. Or it's, meeting a saxophone player and saying, what a wonderful human being. I'd like to know him better or something. It's all about living the life. So I say that what I do is all a form of journalism, that even if I'm writing a song or playing a gig, I'm basically just expressing what it feels like. So my favorite gigs are gigs that I can walk away from saying, I didn't leave anything behind. The most noteworthy interview I did was with Miles Davis.
Yeah,
I mean,
I wondered about
that interview has been reformatted dozens and dozens of times.
People take from that all the time.
And that happened because of my friend Tommy LaPuma.
Oh, is that right?
It's like exactly what we're talking about. Tommy opened doors for me like I've opened doors for other people.
Right.
And Tommy has been a friend of mine, was a friend of mine from the early 70s. And when I was doing a radio show and interviewing people,
Right.
I said to Tommy, do you think there's any chance I can talk to Miles? Tommy said, sure, no problem.
So you asked.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
It's Billy. Make him say no, right?
Make him say no.
What's the worst that can happen?
They say no. Sure.
They say no.
But
they said yes.
And what he said is, Miles is great. Miles gets a bad rap. People say Miles is tough. He's not tough. He just doesn't like bullshit. And if you come at him, with bullshit, you won't last a second. He said, but you're not going to have any problem. Sure, no problem. And it was fantastic, man. I went out to Miles's house in Malibu with Tommy. Tommy came out there with me.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Tommy's in tow.
And I have to tell you something.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story, but then there's a kicker. So we go out there, we knock on the door. Door opens, there's Miles, man. And Miles, his skin was like burnished. He was a little guy, and he had no fat on him. And his skin was burnished, and I had this impression that it was burnished from all the attention he had gotten from other people staring at him.
It was like polished.
Yeah.
Polished.
Yeah.
So anyway, he gave Tommy a hug, and then he gave me a hug. And then he said, come on in.
Really?
Yeah. And then he made lunch. He cooked lunch. He took us through his house. And then at one point, a couple hours into it, he said, so you want to interview me, huh? I said, yeah, Miles, I do. He said, okay, man, let's go. And we sat down and we talked, and it was just sweet. It was sweet. There was no... It was what Tommy said. If you just show up and be yourself, that was the message of Miles. But here's the kicker I want to tell you. On the way home from Miles's house in Malibu,
Right.
we stopped at Pat Raines's house,
I
who
know
lived
Pat,
down the street. And we sat there, and Pat was on the phone with Dave Sanborn. And Dave Sanborn needed a keyboard player. And I got on the phone with David that same night. And I said, I know your keyboard player, man. His name is Ricky Peterson. I know who your keyboard player is. That was the same night as the Miles interview.
I never knew that.
Yeah. It was coming back from Miles's house. We stopped at Pat's place. And I don't know, a month later, Ricky was playing with David.
God, that's unbelievable. So you created your whole life in Madison. Everything that you've done.
From Madison.
From Madison, yeah.
Madison, and you would branch out from there.
I would almost never work in Madison.
Interesting.
I would keep it as my home. I would keep it as I'm a parent, I'm a neighbor, I'm a regular guy. Because and Leo experienced this a lot. When you're in a place like Madison, the local people can't really grasp what your life is like, and
Right.
it'd be a mistake to try to force it.
But, I mean, it should be said also that Madison is a super hip town. It's a progressive town. It's a university town. It's filled with very interesting people. There's no real music business, and, so there are very few people there who really would know what to make of if Ben came back from a tour or a recording date or whatever and said, this is where I was and this is what they wouldn't know who those people were or what
That's nice, Ben.
Yeah.
So right. Well, but you don't talk about it. You have a life there, and
some people kind of knew, but not really. You were
there was a period of 40 years where I was gone for 20 of them. Okay, I mean I was on the road half the time.
Okay.
And so going home was wonderful. I loved going home.
Since this podcast is primarily geared, well, of course, towards music and the hang, but it's geared towards health. Not only how you stay in shape while you're on the road, but in this case, we can talk a little bit about the health of your family and your relationships and things like that. How did you navigate through 20 years of being gone and raising a son? How do you do that? I mean, people don't know this out there. And obviously, you've done a very good job. You know, the kid turned out pretty damn good there.
Well, I would like to hear what he thinks of that. I mean, I have some memories, but what did it look like to you?
Well, my first thought now, and maybe I wouldn't have thought in these terms at the time, but looking back on it, I don't think that we could speak to this without talking about my mom. Because if 20 of 40 years, or let's say 10 of the 20 that I was growing up, Ben was gone. And I'm an only child.
Yep.
That's half of my life I spent with my mom.
True.
And the kind of support that came from her around what Ben did and around my nutso journey also, because it was totally atypical of me to want to be in that world also.
Right.
I mean, there was nobody around her who knew what to make of what I was into.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that one of the extraordinary things about our family and the success of it is that people were very supportive of one another. I hope that and I think my mom, Judy, felt supported also in stuff that she was interested in, and she was able to build a very rich life. I mean, sometimes people joke, oh, Ben must be so famous in Madison he could run for mayor. No, Judy's the one who could run for mayor. I mean, she's so hooked up in Madison.
Right.
But she held it down all those years while Ben came and went. So I think that that's really a crucial aspect of it. And I even feel it in my life now, like
with Amanda,
my wife, where we are set up in a similar way, but a little bit different. I mean, I don't have to leave town to work. I live in Brooklyn and New York, so there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't have to get on a plane to,
with the exception of when you tour as an artist.
Exactly. But it's not, first of all, to tour as an artist is a privilege, as we know, and I could certainly make a living without doing that. I mean, that's a thing that I'm doing because it's meaningful to me. But the point is that I don't have to be gone half the time. If I were a bebop drummer only, then probably I would. But but Ben did have to leave town to make a living, so he had to be set up in a way where he could say to Judy and to me, like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to be gone. There was no, I think, general conversation about it. It was understood.
Yeah.
This is going to happen. What's weird is I don't have a memory of Ben being gone. And
when? And Ben for the win. But really, that's all about it.
Well, but
I can't. Yeah, what do you think that means?
No, what that is that the family unit was very, very important, obviously, and we would travel a lot together. So he would come out with Judy and Leo would come out with me on gigs because I wasn't a sideman, so I could do it. If I was a sideman, you couldn't do it. But I would go to Japan for 2 weeks, and I would take Judy and Leo, and they would be part of it. And Judy eventually became a travel agent because she just loved traveling. And so the idea was, how do you create an environment where everybody gets to win? That's the main thing. How do you, as he said, Judy was able to put together the life she wanted. She doesn't want to hang out with us musicians all the time.
Right.
She has her friends.
She had her own thing going on.
She had her own thing.
So you're a very independent woman, but
Yes.
yet understood the family
No,
unit.
in fact,
Yeah.
we used to joke that, the success of the marriage was in some part due to the fact that they weren't together all
Yeah,
the time.
I was gone. How
Very
can I miss
true.
you if you don't go away? Was the joke. But the importance is that everybody gets something. Everybody gives something. Everybody respects everybody. That you recognize, and certainly in terms of Leo as a child, he was. As you know, with your own children, he was an equal player in the family unit from the beginning, right? You didn't say, well, you're small, when you're 18, I'll deal with you. You
Right.
deal with people straight out as they are. You treat them seriously. You listen to them when they talk, and subsequently, they start to take ownership in what the family dynamic is about. And it turns out that family and friends are the biggest keys to health that there are. More important.
There it is.
More important than diet.
There it is.
More important than exercise, even though diet and exercise are very important. The statistic says family and friends are the most important things for
That'll
longevity.
keep your blood pressure down if you got it. It really will.
It really
if you
will.
know you're covered
Yeah.
at home and you don't have to worry about your kids, your relationship, and you have that understanding, I can see where that would be absolutely true. I mean, the health of a family, for me, has been critical.
Yeah.
I couldn't do what I do to 20,000 things like
Yeah,
you do.
no,
I mean,
you're right.
I'm trying to take after you so bad, man. I've got so many plates spinning, and I just hope that I
Yeah.
can keep them all up like you do.
Yeah.
I want to say something about the spinning plates too. That's been a little bit of an observation that because I, like you, am trying to keep up with Ben and figure out how he did that, and constantly
Right.
asking myself, how did he?
Right.
On the car over here today, I said, man, 1986, which is funny that we're talking about the Miles interview, because
86.
recently I went through and found a bunch of stuff that he did in 1986, and I'm going, that's a lot to have done, to produce these television shows and to have produced these radio shows, and the records that you made and the records that you produced and the touring. I mean, what a
yeah.
year. And I'm just talking about one particular year and out of many. But looking back on it, one thing that I have noticed is that just in terms of time management, I don't know if you agree with this, but I'm a multitasking guy, and I find sometimes that I can't figure out where to put my attention even for these 5 minutes.
Right.
And what I think, and I'd like to hear you speak to it, but what I think is that Ben did a lot of things, but one at a time. Meaning,
You have focused in on one thing.
focus on
Yeah.
a thing, even if it's just for a day, and then the next day another thing. I never saw you as having 3 telephones up to your ear at the same time. You know what I mean?
How did you do that?
Well, I always found it helpful to have a bunch of things going on because, for example, I'd be writing something and I'd write and I'd get jammed up. Well, that'd be great, man. I'd put it away and I'd go to the piano and I'd do something with the piano. And then I'd be playing and the phone would ring and it would be some radio thing. And I'd do that. And so it was kind of this rolling horizon. It had this forward momentum of its own, which I found helpful.
You're right.
I didn't find that a problem. And, the other thing is I say the difference between being self-employed and unemployed is how you wake up in the morning. It's an attitude. Right? Because there is no difference on the surface. If you're self-employed, being unemployed is just a blink away, right?
Man.
That is so
True.
true.
Right.
Oh,
and so
man.
what happens is at some point, and it took a long time, you recognize that you are the asset. You're not fragmented. It's not, a writer here, a musician there. No, it's you. You are you. The asset is intact. When you walk into a room, you walk into that room and you bring all your experience
bring
with
everything
you.
that- yes.
You bring it all with
Yeah.
you. So it's not one thing working against each other. It's everything working
for you.
Yeah, it all works. It works
And
together.
this is good. This is great advice because some people would think that you're scattered. Not you, but someone like that would be scattered. What you said in the interview you had with your father is that it was, the real Ben Sidran.
Yeah.
Stand
please,
up. Yeah.
stand up. And all those things make you you.
Yes.
Uniquely you, and you are that asset.
Okay, so here's the thing that makes it coherent. And it's very simple, and it goes back to what we were talking about, paying forward. And it's really about caring, and that sounds corny, But caring about things is everything. It's everything. Because if you truly care, your decisions will be good decisions. You'll make the right decisions. And every project is made up of hundreds of teeny little decisions. And any one of those little decisions could lead you astray if you're not pulled forward by caring, by really wanting it to be good and having... So, for example...
and that's that attitude we talked about when you wake up in the morning, whether it's I don't care.
Yeah.
Or bring it on.
I'm here.
Right. I'm showing up.
Well, this is, Phil Woods said this to me. Phil was the great saxophone player. And I said to him, Phil, how does it feel to be able to play anything you can hear? And he said, well, playing's no problem. The problem as you get older is wanting to play, because your desire when you're young is everything you really want. But as you get older, it's harder. And so it's what he said was the desire for desire. You start to want to feel like you did when you were young, and it's hard. And you have to reach deeper as you get older to feel that it's important. And so that's the trick, man. The trick is to stay coherent, stay healthy, keep your relationships intact, because you're going to need it as you get older. It's not going to be easier.
Well, you also said something in that interview about Phil Woods and his regrets.
Yes, well, that's true.
Tell these guys what Phil said, because you interviewed him shortly before he died, did you not?
Yeah, Phil was very regretful that he was not a better parent. He felt that he did not do right by his children, and
because of his chase, because of the chase for
because he was involved.
Yeah,
he was
whatever that
he
means.
was on the road. He was on the road, and he didn't become engaged. And being on the road works as long as it works, and then it doesn't work, and then there you are, man. You're out 400 miles from home on a bus.
Yeah.
And he found himself out there a bunch of times.
Right.
And just getting home was a struggle. So to be a parent was a bridge too far often. And so he felt very badly about that, because, frankly, that's one of the few things you can't undo. You can't repair personal relationships the way you can, fix a gig that's gone bad. Well, I'll make it up. I'll come back. I'll play for free, or I'll do something, you know.
Right.
I mean, again, it's like... The key decision in my life was saying to Judy when she hated L.A., okay, what do you want?
That's huge, and that couldn't have been easy. Was it?
It was.
Really?
It absolutely was.
Well, that's how you're wired, though. Too.
That is how he's wired. I see. This is the other thing that I think, and we've been talking about this a lot. I don't know if we put it in the podcast or not, the one that you and I did recently, but I also think that Ben's story, as inspirational as it is very specific to him because of how he's wired. And in fact, I always heard the story until recently as Ben chose to be in Madison and then invented something around it. But the fact is, he's wired for that. I mean, he's a totally independent-minded, totally independent, self-motivated cat. He didn't really fit into any of the boxes anyway that they were going to try to put him in L.A. or New York. You know what I mean? This is a guy
It was Ben's world.
It was Ben's world, and so Madison
still is Ben's world, by the way.
And and we're all living in it. But I mean,
and glad to be living in it.
But that's the thing, is that to be in a space like Madison that was already so off the map of what a career would look like gave him a lot of freedom to define his space.
Right.
And that's what I think about now.
Interesting way to look at that.
Well, and another thing that family does is it gives you a support system. Family and friends gives you a support system that, times are going to be rough. When we talked about having a child, and I was saying to Judy, I don't know. And I mean, because back then I had enough money in the bank for 6 weeks or something, and I didn't know what was going to be after that.
Yeah.
Right.
And Judy said, you know what? If we eat crackers, the kid will eat crackers. Don't worry about it.
You're never ready, really.
You're never ready.
Yeah.
And so... that's the other part of it. Having a support system can give you the courage to do what you need to do when you need to do it. That's a whole deal. It's not so much what you do sometimes, but when you do it. And those moments are key. And, time is passing. And so I was just very lucky to have made some right decisions. And also, let's face it, back then, it was not as hard to make a living as it is today. Today, it's so expensive. I mean,
It is.
we're talking about a time when I had a mortgage payment of $120 a month, man.
Well, let's talk about how you monetize the business that we're in. That has changed so dramatically as well.
Yeah. I don't think well, Leo can, I don't know anymore. The business that I knew, the business I grew up in is gone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's gone just like if I was a blacksmith and here comes Henry Ford, right?
Right.
Here come automobiles and I'm sitting there making horseshoes. The business I knew is gone.
Yeah.
So I don't
But
know.
what I see now, in fact, this is a great transition because as kid grows up, goes to Spain and hangs out, and he's experiences all these wonderful genres of music that I'm sure you helped expose him to, but you were living in it.
Yeah.
Then you start writing these songs,
Yeah.
and you're still living in Madison, and you write this song and get nominated for an Academy Award. Is that right? Were you in?
I did not write. I produced,
You produced-
the song
that's right.
that won the Academy Award in
Jeez.
2005. But there's a long version of the story, there's a short version of the story. But I will say this: I started going to Spain, and I think I started going in high school.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I ended up doing a year of college there and getting pretty deep into this scene of musicians and songwriters there. And in a way, I do think that it was my attempt to find a space in music that I could define for myself, because Ben didn't speak any Spanish, he didn't know anything about that music.
Right.
And, even though the door had been open for me and, all the people in Ben's world had welcomed me, and I was playing with people, and you and your brothers were so encouraging. I still sort of felt like, well, I need to find a little bit of space that's like belongs to me, And I found in
Right.
Spain, I spoke very good Spanish, and I found this group of people who were as excited to meet an American kid as I was to meet them, because these people weren't used to some American dude showing up and wanting to work with them and meet them.
Right.
And so one of the people I met has become a very good friend of ours, this guy Jorge Drexler, who I was a huge fan of when I was in college in Spain. And it was one of these things where, I didn't know that he wasn't very famous. I thought he was like the most famous guy in Spain. It just turns out that I had found this cat when most people didn't know who he was, and I recognized something amazing about who he was. And today, fast forward 20 years, he's one of the most famous and most important Spanish language songwriters. He's won the Oscar, Grammys. He plays to massive audiences all over South America, Latin America, and Spain. But at the time, I just was a fan. And we met him because after I started going to Spain, Ben came to visit, and we realized that we could play in Spain together. I mean, in the first place, he hadn't ever really played there, so he had fans that were wondering, where you been? And I also was able to book gigs because I spoke Spanish and I kind of understood the world, and so we developed this tradition of booking gigs in Spain. And early on,
No way. So
maybe even
that's how that
the
happened.
first tour that we did in Spain, we got a little booking agent. We played in some funny little towns and played in the
that's
capital cities also. We played out in this little town outside of Madrid. It was like a little municipal theater. I was joking about it the whole time because I was like, who is here that could possibly even understand what we're doing? Ben's out there doing his rap.
I'm talking all my crazy stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like,
no difference to me.
you imagine they just turn up the house lights and people are just like stunned, wouldn't even know what to make of this thing that's happening. But it turns out that one of these little towns that we played in was like the musician town outside of Madrid, and it was filled with all the cats.
All the cats were there.
Right.
And so a couple days later, we were down in Madrid, which is the capital of Spain, and hanging out at the bar at this jazz club where we were going to be playing. And this guy comes up to me, and he says to me, "Are you Leo Sidran?" And I said, "Yeah." "Are you Jorge Drexler?" And he said, "Yeah, this is the guy I was a huge fan of."
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah, I heard you play up in my town a couple nights ago. I really liked what you guys did." And that's how we became friends.
No kidding.
So, and as with everything, especially at that time in my life, the music and the family thing, they were so intertwined that basically Jorge and his family sort of became wrapped up in our family, and the next thing you know, they're spending their summers in Madison
No
on
kidding.
vacation. Yeah.
God, that's
So
fantastic.
And Ben, meanwhile, started to become like a real known quantity in Spain because we started going there more and more. And now he's, definitely an established act in Spain because we go all the time. But so it really was one of these things of like anything that speaking to what you said, anything that you care about.
Right.
There's room for it.
That's what I hear
in a career.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. The bottom line in building a career is being yourself.
Yeah.
The only thing that you have to offer is who you are. If you try to be somebody else, by definition, you're second best. Somebody else is already better, right? It's very simple, but we lose sight of this because we're always comparing ourselves to other people.
Oh man, that
But
is so
our
true.
best shot is to be ourselves, to care about what we care about, to be sincere all the way through it, to show up. When you show up, like we
Right.
did this morning to cut
Yeah.
that thing. We had
Yeah.
a good time. There was no problem.
It was great.
But everybody was in the room. Everybody showed up.
Yeah.
Nobody was shucking and jiving and carrying
Right.
on. So
We were there to do a job and have fun.
well, and so here's to me the jazz message. The jazz message is every time you put your horn in your mouth, whether you're at a daycare center or you're at Carnegie Hall, you have the same intention, the same caring, because you don't know when something great's going to happen.
That's right.
So if you just, shuck it for the moment and don't care, you could be missing a branch in the road that could lead you somewhere wonderful. So this whole thing about, be yourself, show up, care about what you care about, it's very simple. You hear it over and over again. But that is when I talk to musicians about what did Miles teach you? What did this guy teach you? That's what they all say, be yourself.
And it raises this really interesting question about how to have a career. I mean, we're here now in our conversation because you started to say, well, how do you get paid? But
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's new.
but
It's
what
different
Ben
than what we are used to and what we grew up with.
Right.
But yeah,
But
exactly
it's also
right.
hard. So what I think is the challenge right now, maybe it was always the challenge, is to take the philosophy that Ben is espousing, be yourself, take your shot, and then also, okay, but like literally, like how do I pay the rent, and everybody's got to find their version of that. There is no degree that you can get. There's no book that you can. Obviously, there's a book that you could read that'll tell you, look, these are performance rights organizations, and these are you got to get your sound exchange together and get there's all that technical aspect of it, and people are debating. You and I have been texting back and forth about podcasting platforms. There's all of that, but that doesn't really answer the question. But how do you make a living showing up, taking your best shot? And I don't know that
there's not
an
way.
answer. There's not a way.
There's not a way. Everything is in process.
But you have let's say, for example, you're writing a commercial. You have guidelines.
Sure.
But people will come to you, or you'll go after that. I'm thinking.
Yes.
I don't want to speak for you,
Yes.
but I would think you'd read the brief.
Yes.
Right. That would come in, and you
Sure.
go, okay. And you're going to give them something that no one else but Leo Sidran can give them.
Yes and no.
So
but
is that a way to show up
sure.
authentically?
That's a really good question. I mean, that's a very specific thing because, as you know, I write music for TV commercials. But the question of how to provide a good version of Leo Sidran when I write a commercial, that's a thing I think that everybody's got to find on their own. In the case of commercials, as you know, it's competitive.
Yes.
So that's why you're looking for an edge. I mean, there's an argument to be made that would say all music is competitive in the sense that you make music and you're trying to compete for space in the world for people to hear it. But in the case of writing commercials, it's literally like a contest. Like 10 people are going to write a commercial, music for a commercial, and one person's going to get selected. And the ground can shift under you 100 times while you're doing it. And everybody's got their little tricks. At the end of the day, I don't actually know 15 years into doing it if I know any more today than I did when I started. To me, the question is not that. It's this. I'm on the road with my dad. I get called to write a commercial. I got my laptop with me.
Right.
I know I can't do my best work on the road because I don't have all the gear, all the stuff. But I also know if I say no too many times, they might not call me anymore. What choice do I make in that situation?
You work with what you got.
You work with what you got and you show up and you be a guy who shows up.
Yeah.
That tends to be my answer. But on the other hand, sometimes I have to really look at the situation and say, I'm not in this. I'm not going to be proud of what I send. I don't want to send stuff that really I can't stand behind. I don't have a hard and fast answer, but those are the kinds of struggles or questions that I ask economically in my life, because my life is set up where part of it is I'm providing a service, music as service. I take my talent and I sell it.
Yep.
As we do.
Service industry.
And on the other hand, I have a part of my career that's kind of borrows more from the Ben philosophy of, you show up and be yourself always. And I am myself when I do the commercials too, but those are questions that I recognize in the sort of what I consider to be the sort of the new gig economy of making a living in music today that maybe Ben wasn't thinking about when he was at the top of his career.
Part of what I'm hearing here is people saying yes as opposed to no. Mm-hmm. Hey, Paul, can you blah, blah, blah? Yes. Your first reaction is yes. Even if you've never...
And then I have no idea, and then I got to figure it out. But there's something to be learned there.
You told me, I didn't even remember this, that when I put together the traveling band for Steve Miller in 1989... That I had the band figured out. I was going to be his music director, and we needed a rhythm guitar player. And since your two brothers were in the band, I went to you and said, "Hey, Paul, can you play guitar?" And you said yes. And then 25 years later, you confessed to me you didn't have any idea if you could pull it off.
No, I was scared to death. I'm like, well, let me go listen to some Steve Miller.
Yeah. Right.
And
let me see if I can.
You said yes.
Yeah, but you said yes. You didn't hesitate to the point where I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't have any idea that you were scared.
Oh, yeah.
And similarly, I had an experience. I once played Carnegie Hall with. It was a tribute to the jazz singer Eddie Jefferson, and I was on stage with the Manhattan Transfer and Bobby McFerrin and all these people, and I had to stand up. I couldn't hide behind the piano. I had to stand up and sing, and I never did it in my life. I was terrified.
Yeah.
But they asked me to do it. I said, yes, of course I can do it. I had no idea if I was going to pull it off or not. Saying yes, man,
but
is
you know
huge.
what you did pull off at Carnegie Hall standing and singing? You were Ben Sidran at Carnegie Hall singing.
That's right.
There was nobody else who could be Ben Sidran standing up there and singing.
And that's what we're talking about. Say yes, right? Throw yourself into situations that you don't know if you're ready for.
In. And you will, let me add this, as long as you show up and do your homework and show up to the best of your ability.
Yes.
I may have said yes, but I can tell you how much time I put in to make sure that I didn't make you look bad.
That's right.
Or my brothers look bad. Yeah.
But don't you think this is the other thing that I have experienced when somebody asks you to do something that you can't do.
Or that you haven't done.
That you haven't done.
Not that you can't do.
Not that you can't do. That you haven't done.
You don't have the experience quite yet.
That's right. But they believe that you can, by asking you to do it, they believe you can.
Yeah.
It makes you want to rise to the occasion. Sure. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
Whenever I've been asked to do something that's a challenge, I think, well, I don't know if I can pull that off. But this person seems to think I can, and I respect this person.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this person. I think maybe I can then.
It comes back to the relationship thing again.
Yeah.
All the way back to the... Were you ever worried that Leo said, I'm going into the business?
I never encouraged Leo to be in the business. I never did. And Leo never let me be the mentor to him when he was a kid. I couldn't show him anything on the piano.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. He would say, I know that, or I don't want to, But then he'd go to you, or he'd go to Ricky.
Yeah.
And you guys would show him. So
just little tidbits, too. And then you'd go off on your own.
But see, that's what it is. You have
nuggets.
Nuggets, and you have to be self-motivated. You really have. This goes back to caring. You have to care about something. He cared about that enough, so when you showed him something or somebody showed him something, he would somehow incorporate that into his language, and it would become part of his language. And it would be him, not you at that point. He would take from you and make it his own. And so I was always very happy that he had something he loved. And quite honestly, I wouldn't have cared if it was gardening. It wouldn't have mattered to me at all. The fact that it was music and we can hang out, it's wonderful. But if it had been gardening, we'd be in a garden.
Right.
What was more important was the relationship.
Well, and the Spanish thing kind of speaks to that. The fact that Ben became such a cat in Spain.
How great is that? But you help cultivate
No,
that.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Because
that's so
I was into
beautiful.
Spain,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
I started bringing him over to Spain, and then he said, oh, "Okay, cool, we're hanging in Spain now," and that's kind of how that happened.
Well, let me ask you this, Leo. Was it ever difficult to be a famous person's kid?
Yeah, totally.
How so?
What's funny is you say famous person because I think I don't know how famous Ben is, but he was real famous to me. He loomed.
I think he's famous.
He loomed really large to me. I just thought he was invincible. I mean, I thought he was a superhero. I thought all you guys were superheroes, honestly. And well, like I spoke to earlier, I had that what they call imposter syndrome. Where you're afraid that you're going to get caught, you're going to get found out. I had that for a long time. I used to worry when I was on stage, like playing. In my 20s, I would be on stage looking at the audience and think that I could see them judging me.
I know.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. And
You
we
are. Well,
all
that just makes you a
know.
musician. That's
Exactly.
all. You're one of us.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
funny. That's true.
It is.
Every time we came off stage, your brother Billy would say, "We fooled him again."
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
We fooled
Yeah.
him again.
But finding your own voice when
Yes.
you have such a
Yes.
presence in your father,
Well,
was
that-
that difficult for you?
I think it was. I mean, I think I didn't know if I was supposed to sound like him or sound like the opposite of him, or I had his voice in my head for a long time, and but I don't know at the end of the day if that really is about him. I mean, I certainly would have said over many times in my life, yes, this is about Ben and how difficult this is to be my father's son, but at the end of the day, I think it's just finding yourself, and that was my version of that.
Right. That can be the toughest part of the journey too. Is like, okay, wait a minute now. What am I supposed to be doing?
Totally.
Who am I?
And I think, for example, because we're playing these gigs, and I'm playing drums with Ben this week, which is like a hat that I put on sometimes. There was this time when I had heard all of the other drummers who played with Ben, and I thought I'm supposed to sound like them, and the music goes like that, and this is how Gordy Knudsen played it, this is how Peter Erskine played it, here's how Steve Gadd played it, here's how, just and on and on. And interestingly, Ben never told me how it was supposed to go. And then I got to find my sound in his music. I got to find my own.
Yeah.
And then we got to influence the music. That's why I said earlier, I feel like we've been working together long enough that we've influenced each other. Like I know that the sound of his band is influenced by the way I play drums with him. And that happened because he really didn't. I've seen other fathers' sons. I've seen other son drummers playing with their fathers, and their dads say, you have to go to school on so-and-so's drum part. That the song doesn't work without that. You got to play it that way. Ben never said that to me.
Right.
And so over time,
That creates curiosity, though. Don't you think that helped develop your voice?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was all in my head. You
Right.
know what I mean? It wasn't coming off of him at all. I give him a lot of credit for that. He never said, you got to do this, or he just let me work that whole thing out until I walk out on stage with him, and I know that whatever it sounds like, it totally sounds like us.
That's it.
Right.
It doesn't sound like anybody else, and that's the top.
What's so beautiful in the moment, too.
Yeah.
And we've come off of stages at jazz festivals with some of the greatest musicians around, and they go, "Yeah, man, that sounded great." Right? They don't judge.
Well,
they feel. They
Yeah.
feel. If
Yeah.
it feels good, man,
Yeah.
that's everything.
Yeah.
It keeps coming back to this simple thing. Your being here on the planet is an opportunity. That's what it is. This is an opportunity to discover who you are, and you discover that through what you do, right? You don't go off into a cave and meditate for 20 years, right? Or very few people do. Maybe some people
It's
do.
done. It
It's
has been
done.
done.
It is done. But generally what you do is you go out into the world and you bump up against it,
Yeah.
and you get tested all these different ways, and how, in the end, you choose to carry on determines who you are. And music is a wonderful version of the journey, because the musical journey you can't really hide. You bring all your bad habits with you wherever you go. You can't hide. Everybody hears them. And then eventually you start to fall in love with your own path. You start to say, as Leo said, that's who we are. We sound like us. I like us.
Yeah.
I like being us. That's
and being
good.
comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that. I don't
Right.
have to be somebody else in order to feel good. And lo and behold, that turns out to be a metaphor for the entire journey. That's really what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to be comfortable with ourselves. And so music is a wonderful way to do that. I mean, ultimately, any choice you make is a metaphor for doing that. If you're going to sell shoes, that's just an alternative metaphor. And, I'm sure that's a tough business also. Like we're in a tough business right now.
Oh, yeah.
But I think pretty much every business is a tough business right now. It's a tough world. The world is it's much less forgiving, let me put it that way, than it was a while ago. And we're all having to find our way through it.
All right. Well, you have over 30 records you've done, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
You
Almost
just had
40.
a birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
76.
76. Trombones.
Trombones, that's what Billy was singing, yeah.
So explain to me, how important is legacy to you?
That's a good question. I think it's always been important, and so I planned ahead. This is a true thing. My father died and left behind a stopped watch and an empty wallet, and I'm not even kidding. That's what he left behind. That's a song, is right.
Ooh.
So I was very aware. And he died when I was young. I was in my early 20s. And I was very aware of wanting to leave something behind so that my child would know me and that my friends would know me. And that so from the beginning, I've always been very conscious of not legacy so much, but leaving artifacts behind, a trail through the forest.
Yeah.
And now, at this point, I don't think about it at all.
Really?
I literally don't think about it. I am working now on how to live the rest of my life without the necessity of generating product. Mm-hmm. I think about that all the time. I've lived my whole life generating product.
Sure.
Making this, making that, selling this, selling that. I would like to think that there's a way at the end of one's life where you're living it is the product. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Much more than I'm thinking about what to leave behind. I think I've left enough behind.
Yeah.
There's enough there that my granddaughter can pick up that book and read it and go, oh, that's what he was thinking.
Right.
I don't need to do that. What I need to do now is I need to find the peace that can come. I tell you what, here's something, this will tell you what my interior journey is like. I fell in love with a particular writer, a Japanese writer, and so this summer I decided one of the projects I was going to read every book he wrote. He wrote 15 books. So I did that this summer, and I sat in the backyard and I read all Murakami's books. And at one point I was like sitting in there and I was looking and I saw the wind blowing through the trees. Now think about that. You can't see the wind. The wind's invisible. What I saw was the trees moving. And it occurred to me that you'll never see the wind. The only thing you can do is infer the wind is there when the trees move. And man, that really hit me. That there's a lot about life that's like that.
Yeah.
It's a lot about life that you don't get to see and you don't get to know. You can infer it by what happens. And so that was a good day for me.
Wow. Hey, I got another question for you. How proud are you of Kid?
He made me look so good. He really showed up. He made me look so good. I mean, he's a great cat. I mean, he's just a great cat. The fact that he's talented, that's a bonus. I just love the fact that he's a great guy.
It's just so fun to watch you two work together. And what a thing it must be for you, Leo, to be able to say, I get to work with my pops and hang out with my pops. And
Yeah. I mean, every time more, and you asked before, was it hard to be the son of? And I think also, like, I spent a big part of my life when I was younger going, yeah, but you see, I'm going to do my own thing. See, I'm not only about, people think it's just about my dad, but I wait till they see what I can lay on the world. And maybe I did lay enough on the world that I started to feel like I could come to be with him and not have it make me feel like less than, but make me feel like more than, I don't know exactly what it is, but now every time we walk into a room in a session on the stage, I mean, I really do make an effort to just say, you're here. Just love this. Love every moment of this.
Yeah.
Appreciate this for whatever happens, and
Show up and care about it,
Show
just
up and
like-
care.
yeah.
Yeah.
Show them care.
Yeah.
It's so simple, man. It's wonderful. It's so simple. And, this again goes to your whole question about health and survival on
Yeah.
the road. You get into a lot of bad habits on the road because you can't control your life. You can't control the food you eat. You go out there and there's the same food in catering or there's the same fast food. And it's
Right.
hard. It is
Yeah.
hard.
Yes.
And so, you're out there for 2 or 3 weeks. You can lose yourself, man. You could look around and go, well, how did I get here?
Right.
Where am I? So, showing up and caring turns out to be a big part of survival.
Well, caring not only for your relationships, but for yourself. I mean, you've got to stay in shape.
Yes.
Man, 'cause
Precisely.
You can't do what you do if you're not healthy.
Precisely.
But I think the thing with you and health is that you never took anything too far. I mean, the one thing, ironically, that you did take too far
Moderation.
was running. Actually, that's
Yeah.
the one thing that you did too much of.
Well,
and
wait
then-
a minute. We didn't even go. I mean,
I know.
I wasn't even going to
I
go
know.
down this road,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that you were a runner. You have to tell me a little bit about
Oh,
that.
me and Billy used to run all the time. Running with Billy was fantastic, man. He was a hell of a runner. He probably still is. No, I ran a marathon, and I got into running when in my 30s.
No kidding.
Oh yeah. I mean, the first day I went out, I ran a half a block and walked home, and eventually I was running 5, 6, 10 miles. And what happened
Right.
was, I got into the endorphins, and I got into further. The only thing that counts is running further.
Yep.
And so eventually, I had many years later, I had to have a hip replacement. I had damaged the joints. I mean, you
I'm
can't.
listening because I am a marathon runner as well. So
You can't do it, man. Your body is not made to do that. If you can run,
you're telling. Oh,
listen, if you can run 6 or 7 miles comfortably, that's wonderful. Your body can do that. But 10 miles is a pretty extreme distance. And 15, 20, we're not really set up as animals to do that. And there's a price to pay. So I only wish I had kept my running to 5 miles.
and you could still do it.
I could still do it.
On the other hand, there was something physical in Ben's body that was changed by running, and he has a heart condition that I think was he was able to survive because he had been a runner.
that
If
helped you
makes any
through that.
sense.
That's true. The doctor said that to me.
Interesting.
That
Interesting.
I survived a heart problem because my heart was so strong from running. So on the one hand, it cost me my hip, and on the other hand, it
You're
saved
still on
my
the
heart.
planet.
Your life. So you choose, Paul. You
Yeah,
make
you
your
choose.
choices.
Wait,
Yeah.
you
Oh
decide,
boy.
man.
Okay, let me think about that. I'll get back to you. What about you, Leo? What do you do? Is there any kind of a routine that you have, whether it's at home or on the road?
You know what I got into in the last handful of years of yoga?
Is that right?
Yeah.
What's it do for you?
A few things. One of the things I really like about it is that it is about connecting your breath and your mind with your body. So it's like a moving meditation. It can be. I find it when I can. It's really helpful to do it before I play. It
Interesting.
totally centers me in my body. It gives me a point of focus. I mean, it does both of those things. It's a physical thing. It puts me in touch with my body. It gets me aware of my posture and how I want to hold my body in space. And it also gives me a focus for my mind because, as I was saying to Ben last night, I hadn't played a gig in a couple of months before we played last night. And I said, you know what I realized? It's not my chops that go down. It's my mental acuity. It's my mental focus to play 2 straight hours and keep reminding myself to come back to the music and not let it drift. And I find that yoga is something that helps me center literally my mind and my body.
Wow, so mental focus. Wow, that's fantastic because that's what running does for me.
I imagine it
Yeah.
would. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Imagine
why
it.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
to get away from the phone
Yeah.
and just be out there.
Yeah.
Running's marvelous. You know, you get into that space where it's just movement.
Yeah.
It's just your movement. You become movement. There's nothing like it. I miss it. I do miss it.
I bet you do. And I love listening to new music,
Yeah.
old music.
Yeah. Out
Just
there.
stuff that makes me go, oh,
Yeah.
I forgot about
Yeah.
this. I love researching my podcast
Yes.
people when I'm running.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great. It's fun. It's a great escape
Yes.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what's next. Well, we just cut a song for you. What's next for you, Ben?
Well, I got some writing projects that I'm working on. But as I say,
Yep.
I'm trying to sort this
You're working on that.
this product-free existence. I
gotta
don't
say,
know.
that is. I mean, Ben has said some things I never heard him say before in this conversation. But this thing that he's telling you, this is like a really new thing to say, getting away from product, because it's true. You have been. There is no force in the world stronger than Ben when he has an idea to get something done.
Yeah.
Nothing matters more to him than making sure that this thing gets done when he cares about it. I mean, that's not nothing, but the point is, like, it's very important to him that it get done. So the idea that wouldn't be, behind
there's a little
it.
switch. Huh?
Well, no, in some ways, I see it as just an extension of that. It's the same thing. It's just not focused on generating an artifact and trying to market it. Although, having said that, the next thing is that I wrote a biography of Tommy LaPuma.
Did you? Oh,
Tommy
I
died
did
2
not
years
know
ago.
that. Yeah.
And I spent the last 2 years of Tommy's life interviewing him. We were going to write this thing together, his story. So I got all his stories.
Oh, my God.
And then when he died a couple of years ago, as a matter of fact, about a month before he passed away, Leo and I had dinner with him. And I said to him, Tommy, I can't write the book you want me to write. You have to write the book you want. I want to write the book I want to write. And Tommy gave me his blessing that night at dinner. He said, go ahead, do what you want with it. And then he died.
Oh.
So I did. I wrote the story I wanted to write. And so that's going to come out in March. And I'm real happy about that because, honestly, Tommy's not that famous a guy. There's a few thousand people out here who know who he is and what he did.
Do we ever.
We do. But it's not the general public. It's not like, Paul McCartney or a rock star, even though he sold 75 million records.
Yes, he did.
So it's a labor of love. And so in that sense, it's wonderful for me because I am in the process of kind of disengaging from the constant need to monetize. That's becoming important to me, just like when I play gigs now.
Yeah.
It's very important to me to have gigs that aren't money-driven because so many of the...
Right.
But fortunately, you're a jazz musician, so
I don't have to worry about that.
And easier, yeah.
It's getting easier.
Oh, yes.
It's we get to choose our lives, Paul.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. We get to choose who we are and how we live, and we spend our lives kind of wandering in a daze, thinking somebody else is going to tell us, and nobody shows up to tell us. And to this day, I'm 76 years old. I'm still dealing with that.
Yeah. That's all part of the journey, man.
Caring.
It is.
That's why caring is important, man. You really, it's like when you say you listen to music and it's old music and you forgot how great that sounded. That's real important, man. Those
Sure
those moments when you hear something and it reminds you of, the good.
Yeah.
That's it.
We need the good.
We need the good. These are hard times. There's
That's
some
a good name for a song, too. We need
That's the name of this episode, I would say. If you need a name
we
for
need
it,
the
we need
good.
the good. Yeah.
We need the good. And we want to bring it.
And Leo, I'll never stop calling you kid. I'm sorry. You're stuck with that.
He's the
love
kid.
Not many people call me my nickname.
Saint?
Well, no, that one's no.
PJ?
PJ. Yeah.
They don't call you PJ? I thought everybody called you PJ.
Only a few people can get away. Oh, now the world knows.
Now
Now
the
they
world
all know.
knows.
Now the world knows.
But you don't have to tell them what it stands for.
All right, maybe I'll take that part out of the...
Yeah, you cut
no,
that
I won't.
PJ.
I have
thing.
editing capabilities I probably won't use. You wrote a song for your Pop's 76th birthday.
Yes, I did.
Oh, man.
Tell me a little bit about Pop.
Well,
The song Pop.
yes, Pop was the name that Ben and his siblings called their father,
Right.
Lou.
Okay.
As he mentioned, his father died in the late 60s when he was in his 20s, and I was born in the mid 70s, so I never met him.
Yep.
I just have this idea of this guy, Pop. And in the Jewish tradition, you can name a newborn child after that. You don't name a child generally after a living relative. You would name after somebody who's deceased already, and often it's just the first letter. So my name Leo is in part a tribute to my grandfather Lou. I'm named for Lou. So the song kind of puts together a few of these strings, a few of these ideas together. And the other thing I'll say about Lou is he has represented something huge to me my whole life. Over the course of my life, have imagined conversations I would have with him. First, trying to explain who I am to him and wondering what he would think of me, you
Yeah.
know? And then also as the world started to change more and more, thinking, how would I explain? Imagine that Lou died in 1967. He was born in Poland at the beginning of the 20th century.
Right.
What would I tell him about the world? Show him my cell phone and the internet and what life is like today. I mean, there's so many things that have changed. I'm 2 generations away from him, but
Right.
it's such a different planet. So he now represents this idea of like how the world has changed, you know. So I have all of this in my head when I go into writing this song, which is as much for my father as it is about my grandfather. And it's a
Right.
song that tells this story first of what the environment might have felt like based on stories I've heard of the house that my dad grew up in, because Lou was a deeply talented and troubled person, and the family was not always such a happy place. The house
Right.
was not a happy place. So it paints this picture of a kind of sad, quiet loneliness in this house. That's the first verse. And the second verse tells the other side of Lou, because the thing that we learned about him after he died, Ben learned and I subsequently learned, is that he was a total cat outside of the house. People loved him. For example, he commuted every day from Racine, Wisconsin to Chicago, where he worked in advertising. And people said to Ben, man, you should have seen him in the bar car on the train ride home. He was a cat. He was so
Really?
funny. He knew all the jokes, and he played, had a card game on. You know, it seems like you never really got to see that part of him. So as much as I thought, I never got to meet my grandfather, it's almost like Ben really never got to meet him in that way either.
Right.
And so the song is really talking about my dad as a child, talking about my grandfather as an adult, then talks about me, how they named me for him, and also raises this question of what it would be like to talk to him. It really was a kind of a tribute to talk about the generational
Yeah.
continuity, you know?
Right.
And made a little video that was based on all of these images.
So you have to look this up.
Yeah.
This video is brilliant. The song is brilliant.
Thank you.
And
And
the
then,
intent
we
and-
put it out for Ben's birthday a couple weeks ago. And I never wrote anything like that. I think you wrote that. A couple people wrote to me and said, man, you never wrote anything like that. I never did write anything that was both that visual and that personal.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the response when you put yourself out there and really share something personal like that, it's a different kind of response that I got to that song.
Yeah, it's so great, and everything that you're doing, the third story, all the videos that you're making
Yeah,
now,
man, thanks, man.
presence that you have online, it's great, and I'm learning from you.
Well, I'm
now.
still learning from you, man. Now we're doing it to each other then, because I'm still checking you out, and it's so cool to, to continue to be in your life, man. Really.
Guys, this has been a dream come true to get the two of you
Yeah.
together. And of course in the studio too, but
I'm glad we
to be
could
able
do
to do
this,
this.
yeah.
Thanks for taking the time out.
Glad
I
we
know you
could do
got a
this,
gig
Paul.
tonight,
Ah,
but I appreciate you taking the time out. Man, I always learn something from you every time we sit down. I drop you little notes once in a
You
while.
do,
and say,
man. I
I'm
appreciate
like,
it,
I
too."
learned something again. Oh, Ben, you gave me another lesson. So thank you, and thanks for everything that you've always done for me and my family as well. I mean,
Well,
it does not go unnoticed.
back at you. I've picked up a lot of good pointers from you and your family.
Yeah. Well, I love you, and that's it.
That's it.
We did it.
So thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
This has been Music on the Run with the Sidrans, Leo and Ben Sidran. Join us next time for the next episode. We're out. Music on the Run was hosted by yours truly, St. Paul Peterson, recorded and produced by Davide Raso, lighting and videography by David Kurtovich, and video editing by Ivan Sevastyanov. Special thanks to Steve Weiss at Creation Audio for hosting us. And a huge thanks to these fine folks you see listed here. It would not be possible to put on this podcast without them. Thank you so much for being our patrons. If you'd like to help us produce these programs, please go to patreon.com/Music on the Run podcast, and we'll tell you about all the incentives we have for you for becoming our partner. Remember, Ben Sidran always says, "How can I miss you if you won't go away?"